And what post-show number is this, Tom?
19.
Is you sure?
I've just typed the number. Yes.
Just type the number. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Let's do it then. Let's do it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sounds of Stadia post-show, episode number 19. We've had it confirmed by the techie teacher himself. I'm Chris, one of your hosts, joined by the aforementioned techie teacher himself. Welcome back, Tom.
Yo. What's
And
up?
below him, continuing on from the main show, the man of many pixels, Mr. Richie. Hello,
Good
Richie.
afternoon.
It seems weird saying hello after we've already spoke for like 2 hours.
Yeah, it's like we've just recorded an entire show, plus meetings and setting up this show. It's like,
Yeah.
hello again.
Hello again, hello again. But obviously this is for our lovely audience who is seeing this on a Friday. And if you are seeing this even earlier than the Friday, that is because you are one of our wonderful patrons over on patreon.com/Sounds of Stadia. You support us that extra little bit more. You go above and beyond, and we wholeheartedly appreciate you. And that's why we bring you this post show 5 days early so you can view it before the general public over on youtube.com/Sounds of Stadia Games. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe down below so you are kept in the loop with all of these types of videos and our discussions in our post-show realm of things that we do. And this week, gentlemen, we are wrapping up our Games of a Generation conversation. We've covered Switch, we've covered Xbox, we've covered PlayStation, and here we are covering everything in between, which is our third-party games. There are a ton of them to get through, so without further delay, let's get into it. Going down the list, do we just want to shout them all out and then we'll pick out our favourites, do you think? So then everything gets a shout out, but then we can focus a bit more on maybe our select favourites rather than systematically going through them and going, here's A through Z. So
I think we should explain the list a little bit
Go on
first.
then, you
'cause
explain the list.
We were struggling to find a dedicated list for only third parties, so I've just went through various different sales lists for Stadia, for PlayStation, for Xbox, for Switch, and even touched on PC a little bit, and just pulled out some titles that jumped out at me. So there's going to be titles we've missed just because I'm an idiot.
no.
And there's no particular order.
no-
So if your favorite game or something massive I've missed, and also I used January 2012 as a cutoff point. So anything before then, even if it was cross-generation, it was not counted. And that was for the initial release.
Okay.
And then we put an asterisk and put GTA.
Yeah. GTA was apparently 2013, so that made it in properly.
Yes, actually, yeah, I suppose it launched the
Yeah.
summer before PS4, sorry,
Yeah.
came out. But yes, let's go down the list. Should we just take turns so we see how quick we can get through this? We'll go one after another. I'll go first, then Tom, then Richie, then back to me. Right?
Where's the list?
Oh, well, that will help. It's further down the dock, Tom, just underneath today's episode.
Thank you. I'm completely unprepared for this today. All right, thank you. Got it.
You got it. Wonderful.
Crack on. Crack on.
So, again, if we've missed them out, apologies. If we miss one out, in fact, let us know in the comments below what your favourite game of the past generation is, albeit PlayStation, Xbox, whatever. This is third party, so let's get into it. From Square Enix, we have the Tomb Raider series.
Ooh, fantastic titles. We've also good stuff. This list can't go without mentioning the entire Call of Duty franchise, really, can it?
Yeah. Likewise, what you'll find is some of them we've kind of grouped together. So next I'm going to say it's the annual sports series games, things like FIFA and Madden. Basically EA's library.
He is, yeah. It's aside from the Star Wars ones.
Yeah.
Massive shout out, of course, to PUBG, kickstarting the Battle Royale craze that's just taken over the world. I don't think the game industry would be as money driven as it was if it was not for Battle Royales and just like creating that whole genre unto itself.
Yeah.
And what title has capitalized more on that than Fortnite? Which, every single kid knows about that game. If you play video games at all, you've heard the name Fortnite before. But as Chris said, PUBG created the Battle Royale. Fortnite dominated it.
Yeah, well, PUBG didn't technically create it. PUBG was the first to popularize the format, and then Fortnite took it to a completely different level. But the next up is, again, it seems like just the way the list is fall, I'm getting like the big group ones. So about half of Ubisoft library have Tom Clancy in the name. So I've grouped them together for the sake of them keeping it nice and condensed.
What would we do without Tom Clancy and his amazing novels? So what have we got? We've got Wildlands bunched in with there. We've got Ghost Recon. We've got Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell, which we kind of haven't heard
The Division
from in a while. The Division. Yeah. He writes some good stuff, right? He wrote some good stuff, we should say, as well. And following on from writing great stuff, we've got Cuphead. Obviously, multi-platform now. It was Xbox, then it went to Nintendo Switch too. Brutal cartoon game, copying off obviously the likes of Disney Animation way back when. Very, very tough to beat, but fun all the same.
Game of a generation, and a truly free game now on every single platform. Massive shout out to Destiny 2 as well. You know it, you love it, you Stadia folk out there. I'm sure you've dabbled in it at some point. But big shout out to Destiny 2 as well on this list.
And then again, another big grouping for me is the Assassin's Creed franchise.
Just all of the Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I don't think...
all of them.
Yeah, just all of them.
Yeah,
everything that came out since 2012. There's a lot of games there.
This specific lot obviously focuses on... we've got Origins.
The reimagining.
We've got, Odyssey. And we've got the newly released title, Valhalla, obviously taking a different turn from the traditional series, but... massive RPGs, open world, and getting loads of plaudits all the same. Speaking of getting loads of plaudits, we've got The Witcher 3. Talk about games of a generation, gentlemen. Wow. We've got the massive titular title from CD Projekt Red, the precursor to Cyberpunk 2077, which is arguably just going to bookend a generation. Witcher 3 and then Cyberpunk. Huge game, and of course it just keeps selling in popularity. I think when the Witcher TV series came out, it sold millions more copies. They've said they're going to do a free next gen update patch as well. I'd like to see it on Stadia someday, and I think we probably will at this point. It's almost becoming Skyrim all over again.
So speaking of Skyrim, we've got to give a shout out to Bethesda for Fallout 4 as well. Like, you cannot miss a Fallout franchise out of any generation. Likewise with the Elder Scrolls, but we haven't seen one that's come out just yet, apart from the fact that Skyrim has transcended everything, including the smart fridges. But Fallout 4 certainly did hit the most recent generation, so we've got to give some recognition over to that title.
Yeah, and well, Call of Duty isn't the only first-person shooter on the block. We have Battlefield 1 coming in again. I remember when that came out, it genuinely looked quite awesome, even though I'm not a big first-person shooter fan, so...
Yeah, it's nice to see it go back to like the original sort of standards of World War as opposed to like the modern warfare type of thing. I always quite liked that with things like the Medal of Honor franchise as well.
Good old shout out to Medal of Honor.
Yeah, Medal of Honor.
Shout out to Medal of Honor.
Medal of Honor.
But speaking of things that are honourable, we've got the Scallywags out in the wild, wild west. We wouldn't be anywhere without Rockstar, with a Rockstar game every generation, because they seem to have struggled to get many out this time round. The only title that we saw on PS4, Xbox, Stadia this time round was in fact Red Dead Redemption 2. Massive open world game, lots of stuff to do, lots of management with your horses and your townsfolk. And your weapons and that, but great game nonetheless, available on Stadia. And will we see a Red Dead 3 anytime soon? No, we will not.
No, we won't.
No, we will not.
Give it another decade.
And we probably won't, because Rockstar are way too busy still capitalizing on that cash milk from GTA 5 as well, which not only have your grandparents played, and your parents, but you've played it as well, because it has actually transpired. It's now transgressed across platforms. It's been on the PlayStation 3, it's been on PS4, and it's going PS5 as well. It just keeps going.
Next we have actually a fantastic game, which although this was one of them games that seemed to keep getting released because of the amount of DLC for that game, and so we're talking about Final Fantasy 15, which to be honest, I love that game, but for me, I still want a good turn-based Final Fantasy game.
It's interesting you say that, because I loved Final Fantasy 15 too, but I still haven't beaten it. I've still not finished it, because I just feel like I just keep going back to it and like picking it up little bits at a time.
Didn't play any of the DLC, but I have got the platinum. But I've got like 120 hours in that game, so I was kind of done with it once I got the platinum.
Is this the one where they regressed back on the DLC they committed to? After like several releases, they said, "Oh, actually, those final pieces of DLC we promised, we're just not going to do anymore."
Yeah, and the game was never truly completed either, from like the perspective of the original way that they wanted it to be, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
That's what happens when you make something so large.
it's true that. It's true that.
But speaking of games that don't need any DLC, Tom, you're in this wheelhouse with me. The Crash Bandicoot. We should probably just say the reboots of a previous generation. Actually, if this generation's shown us one thing, it's that the nostalgia is real amongst gamers out there. And I, for one, I'm steadily planted in that camp because my childhood was brought and rendered in glorious 4K, let's remember, with the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, the Crash Bandicoot, I can't remember, and Nitro Fueled Racing, whatever it was called now, I can't remember it. And then I just want to add on to that one as well, gentlemen, the Spyro Trilogy reboot. Yeah. You've got 3 games from my childhood that I spent so long playing and enjoying, and they still to this day hold up so well, and I've got many, many fond memories, and I'm glad to see them remade with such quality and pristine condition, which we've seen from the guys over at Activision. Massive.
I did say it wasn't a perfect list.
Well, it's not even just those titles, but even like the look at, Chris, you and I, we talked to Helen back about Crash Team Racing as well, and the reboot of that. It's just taking those iconic characters and those iconic childhood sort of gaming nostalgic moments that you talked about, and just breathing new life into it. Because again, those sorts of titles they do again transcend not just our experiences, but you can pass them on to the next generation as well, to the next generation of gamers and so on. And it's been proven that they are incredible games.
They are. They're from a different era, definitely, with the linear style, and I saw people going back in with frustration and stuff, but the love is real, and you can just look at the sales charts of like how many copies of the Insane Trilogy got, and it's like, this is a game from like the mid-90s that, yes, it's been polished up and re-put out, but the core layout of the levels and the stuff and the difficulty spike, it was great to see people trying it for the first time, people going back, and myself, people just who have such rich nostalgia for those characters, like those mascots, which we've done a whole post-show episode on. Does Stadia need a mascot? And I think it goes so far beyond, because like you said, it's transcended generations.
Yep.
And look at it now, it's making so much money for Activision, hand over fist. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Speaking of games that are way out there as well, Nier Automata as well, which is it's a game that if you've not played it before, you'll probably jump into it and think, what the heck am I actually doing? It's such... I can't even find words to describe that game. But
have you played this game, Tom?
Yeah.
Good, because I put it on the list hoping that you might have done.
Yeah. It's an amazing game. I think the Nier franchise in itself has an incredible story to it and an incredible world building. But it will blow your minds if you've never played it before, in terms of like what is actually happening in the world. And when you actually get to certain points within the game, you'll find that Nier Automata in particular has so many different endings to it. Like, there are literally so many different ways that you could complete that game, that it goes from everything from an action-based RPG to even the point that you're playing like one of those old two-dimensional top-down flight shooting games as well. Like, there's just so much to Nier Automata. Great characters, iconic characters as well. Real JRPG.
Next one is something I think we might have already discussed on the Nintendo one, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but I wanted to give it another shout out. And if you haven't picked this up, it is available on Stadia, and that's Octopath Traveler, because that game, I mentioned when I was talking about Final Fantasy 15, I like turn-based JRPGs, and which is why, as much as I love 15, it's like, it's not the game I necessarily wanted from a Final Fantasy. Octopath scratched that itch nicely for me.
Yeah, got loads of praise from that one, from that kind of that style, that aesthetic, and I think everyone thought they were going to change the name, right? And they just committed to it.
It was Project Octopath. Like, oh no, that's actually just the name.
Does the name actually have any like resemblance to what the game is? It does. It's not just like a random.
There isn't a single main character. There's 8, so Octopath. It's like,
and they all converge across over.
Right.
And,
okay. All right. So
pretty
it's
cool.
nothing to do
pretty
with
cool
octopus
concept
then. There's not an evil octopus to fight at the end.
Octopus boss.
Octopus boss.
I can't remember all the.
Speaking of octopus bosses, the famed Diablo series obviously had Diablo 3 drop last generation. It just keeps going from strength to strength. It gets bigger and bigger. Massive following, and they definitely don't want to tease the wrong game when they come out and announce Diablo titles. Remember that mobile game they announced and people thought it was the new Diablo?
Was that BlizzCon as well?
Yeah,
this
it was,
a big one more thing for the entire conference, and it's a mobile game. And everyone's just like,
don't you guys have phones?
Oh, that backfired so much. So they should just double down on Diablo 3. I'm sure we'll get a 4 at some point. But yeah, you don't want to upset that audience because they are committed.
Like, it is Blizzard, and I'm still waiting for Warcraft 4.
I mean, Diablo 4 was announced. We just need to wait for BlizzCon for a little bit more information. I was actually having a conversation about it, but we need more primevals. Diablo it's such a good franchise. Like Diablo 2, throwing it back even further, still holds itself as an incredible game even today. 3, just icing on the top of the cake. Yum, 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 yum. Speaking of all things evil and dark. I'm trying to think of a good segue here. The Hollow Knight series as well. Hollow Knight. I haven't personally had much chance to play the Hollow Knight games, but they are very well loved. I don't have any more to say about them.
Do you have any more to add to Hollow Knight, Richie?
No, it's just one of them games that it always seems to be on my radar. There's loads of different content creators I follow who do praise the game so highly, and well, this actually came from the Switch list I looked at, so it's one of the top selling, one of the most revered games on Switch that isn't Mario or Zelda.
It's very incredibly rated.
There wasn't many third parties on that list.
No, I mean, it's got a 10 out of 10 on Steam, 96% rated, 97%. Yeah, they've got some brilliant ratings for it. So
yeah,
it is a Metroidvania though, so it is definitely a game that I should probably try out.
Yeah,
there you go.
A game that I'm almost certainly never going to try out is the Dark Souls series of games.
Oh, why couldn't I get that one?
Dark Souls 2 may have came out this generation, so we're talking Dark Souls 2 and 3.
Yeah, 3 definitely did.
I haven't actually tried 2. I played 1 and hated it, so...
Yeah,
it's controversial, but it's a Marmite game. I think Dark Souls, either you love that crushing difficulty or you just don't like it, and I was very much in the don't like it category.
It's the kind of game that gets me up and moving around the room, just yelling obscenities and threatening to throw the controller, but never actually doing, because we all treasure our controllers.
Sane people treasure their controllers. It's true. Yeah. It's true. Speaking of little treasures, next up on our list we've got Celeste, which of course won loads of Game of the Years for its 8-bit style storytelling, and who knew a story with such low graphic fidelity could deliver such a heartwarming story. And it won loads of the Games with Impact for that particular year. I think it was a 2018 year, maybe. Finally came over and made the jump over to Stadia. It was in fact one of your pro games. And you got to collect those strawberries, get through the world, and have fun because very well revered, great little title.
Them straubs. Other games, very well known. We've talked about them in our podcast. We've talked about them coming to Stadia. The Watch Dogs franchise are very key, I would say, to Ubisoft's collection of titles that have come out this generation as well. We could also give a shout out to the Far Cry franchise at that point as well. Nicely
just added that in the list. But when we were talking there and I saw Watch Dogs on the list, I was like, is Watch Dogs that well revered? I feel like
it is.
The first one was kind of slightly disappointing, and the second one similar. I've enjoyed them, but in terms of games of a generation, they're definitely near the bottom of this list, right?
Yeah.
And I personally would put Far Cry above them, which is why I added it in there.
I was looking at sales lists, and I must have just missed Far Cry, or it didn't sell as much as Watch Dogs.
That's crazy to think.
But yeah,
I
don't believe it. I don't believe it. Check the polls, Richie. I want to recount.
Anyway, it took a while, but it seems like this game franchise is starting to find its feet again. And we're talking about the Star Wars games. Much maligned for various different reasons. I know Battlefront 2 especially was... Yeah.
Yeah. We had...
The game actually plays really well, but it's the loot box controversies around it that happened before the game even came out. That's how bad a launch it was. But on the plus side, I think that has been a major milestone in the industry in terms of how loot boxes are handled, because that's literally the worst point of them. Yeah. But then we've got Jedi Fallen Order, which I know you two both love.
Yeah, I actually really love
yeah.
Battlefront 2. I had a great time with Battlefront 2. Again, I didn't think the
I hate
microtransactions were as heavy as that people first suggested they were. You didn't have to spend them. You could play the game and enjoy without them. But
Yeah, because the fix it before it came out.
yeah. Well, the dogfight again. 1 was great, didn't have a story. 2 had a story, very weak
They had two
times.
bad
Yeah,
stories.
they shoehorned some multiplayer stuff in there, but the dogfighting and the ships was great. The wild, the battlefield esque wide scale fights was amazing, going from like land combat to space and vice versa. And then Fallen Order, and a special shout out to Star Wars Squadrons as well. Great little game, first person, just kind of building off the back of the squad. The Battlefront.
Let's be real.
Engine.
Like a lot of improvements have been made with the Star Wars franchise, and I think it's because of fan backlash over time as well. I think the developers and the publishers have had to realize that fan voices do mean something. And Battlefront, you are absolutely right. Battlefront 2 made huge strides forward when it went free to play as well as part of PS Plus. It sort of like was rekindled in terms of its player base. Really fun.
A big part of the problem with the Battlefront series was Battlefront, when they rebooted it, it was multiplayer only, and a lot of people were craving for a solid Star Wars story.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of backlash over that. Probably unfairly, to be honest. When 2 came out, they half-assed the story.
Yeah.
It felt like they started writing a good story, but then almost a marketing exec thought you need a load of different hero missions.
Yeah.
So it was just tagged on a load of crap in the middle, which just
that Luke mission.
But yeah, that is the epitome of it. But it was even like the Lando mission and stuff was kind of basically pointless to the overarching narrative of Iden Versio.
Yeah.
Which
totally.
Again, it's like that's the frustrating thing. Is like you've done so much well, but you haven't nailed it. Yeah. And the star cards are one of the worst designed mechanics ever in games, in my opinion. Absolute garbage.
It's a lot of games like this. I wish there were just a platform like Star Wars Battlefront Galaxy should just be the platform, because I think the thing the sequel suffered with was the adding the maps in that the first one had. And it took them like 6-7 months to go, oh, we've added this planet back in. It's like, but that was in the first game. Like, why are we... Like, surely it should be just additional content. And this is where it should just be like Destiny. Just a unit. It should be Star Wars Battlefront Galaxy or Universe or whatever you want to call it. And that's just... They just keep adding to it. And it's an ever-persistent world with add-ons. And then you can do seasons. So when The Mandalorian airs on Disney+, there is a tie-in season with The Mandalorian with skins and packs. When the new movie inevitably comes out, there's a tie-in. And they just kind of missed the boat a little bit on understanding what they should be marketing this as. But fun to be had anyway.
I think they're getting on track. I think Battlefront 2 has become a very good multiplayer game. And then we've got Jedi Fallen Order, which is focused on the single-player narrative stuff. So I think the franchise is now in a good place.
Yeah, and let's not forget we're getting Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga in next spring as well, which I love a good Lego Star Wars game. That was one of the first Lego games that I played. And the fact that it's been like built from the ground up, telling the whole Skywalker saga, I hope they do it justice, because again, that's some of the most revered movies, the most debatable movies of all time, but they're well known regardless. So we're probably, by the sounds of it, we've got a long way to the next one. Speaking of big franchises, though, this last generation kind of brought the superhero. Well, we know Arkham Asylum last gen now brought them to the fruition, but we had Arkham Knight drop as part of the Arkham series as well, which kind of wrapped up that Batman saga, and we're obviously on the cusp of next generation and getting the new ones in Gotham Knights, and I've totally forgot what the Suicide Squad game as well. So we're on the cusp of more superhero games like Spider-Man and such, and I wish we had more superhero games, gentlemen. We grew up with all these movie tie-ins, but I do miss them. I do miss a good X-Men game, Wolverine, Deadpool. The Deadpool game from Activision was fantastic.
True.
And you just can't buy it anymore because they pulled it from the digital stores due to licensing. So go get that. Nolan North voicing Deadpool, nice and witty, brilliant. But there's just so much superheroes lend themselves to games. I think the Arkham series definitely raised the bar. But there's so many heroes out there I'd love to see in a game. Heroes left, right, and centre, Tom.
Absolutely. So speaking of those right there, how can we not give a shout out to the Lord of the Rings games? In particular, I suppose our focus should be on the Shadow of franchise as well there, really, like the Middle-earth, Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor games, which I don't know about you guys, but I just really think that sort of brought a new IP for the Lord of the Rings franchise to the table. It brought a new way of playing a Lord of the Rings game as well, which I wasn't really expecting. It was sort of like Assassin's Creed-esque, but with all of that like lovely, juicy Lord of the Rings lore to it as well, which is just so nice.
They try to tell their own story within the lore of the world that's established, rather than just trying to force a movie tie-in or. Although we should mention, like, War in the North was still a good game, a bit more linear, but
Third Age
I
was
think
a good game.
It's supposed to show you that the lore, if you don't focus on trying to tag it into something else, you can just take the lore and you can build a very solid narrative that adds to the overall franchise and make a very good game out of it.
Yeah, it really highlighted for me the fact that this entire Middle-earth world lends itself to an open world game so well, because you get to explore across. Again, Middle-earth kind of has everything. It has the snowy peaks, it has the forests, it has the barren deserts. It's got all of those like typical seasonal tropes you would expect to see in a game like we've seen in like Horizon Zero Dawn and stuff. Like, you need those different environments, and it has all them in abundance. It has generic enemies to kill in the orcs. It has hero quest missions. It has that story. And it has the locations, and again, seeing some of the cities and locations kind of relive from the movies in great detail that I can explore myself as a player. It's so good, and it really just drives home the message. I would love to see them do a game in like the Second Age, detached from all the movies, but just give me the world, allow me to walk from Angmar to Mordor to Gondor, and maybe even have like a DLC level with Numenor or something like that. It'd just be amazing, and like I'd still hold true that one day we will get it. In line with, I think, Game of Thrones as well. I think that lends itself to an open world adventure similar to this.
Yeah, series comes out, that might be the best time to launch it. So there's a bit more eyes on that era.
I mean, Amazon are making a Lord of the Rings game, right? They've said that.
They are. Yep, they absolutely are.
We just need to see what the hell it looks like, because I'm already sold. Lord of the Rings Online still a thing as well, right? That's still going, ticking over.
It is still going, yeah. Wow, that's a good shout out. That is
just without the with the movie IP, which is as harsh as I hate to say it. It's the movies that are my true representation. If they don't look like the people, that's when I start to go like, I know what you're trying to do, and I know you're respecting the book material, but my vision of Lord of the Rings is Peter Jackson's vision of Lord of the Rings, unfortunately.
Yeah. Shout out to Marvel's Avengers for trying to do that sort of uncanny valley type thing.
We all know how that pays out.
Yeah.
Imagine how much different the Avengers game would have been if it was Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth and stuff, and the voices and the likeness.
Yeah.
You would forgive it for so many issues just because you're like, well, they got them. Like, it is, I'm playing the movie literally beat for beat.
Yep. Wow.
So good.
Wow. So that's the Lord of the Rings games.
And I'm now trying to think of a good pun, and my mind went blank, so we're just going to...
From the fiery pits of hell where the Balrog demons come from, Richie.
There's some franchise that just never dies, and it's finally it took a while actually that we got a good Doom game again in this generation. Doom 2016, as it's usually called, but it's literally just called Doom. Kind of rebooted. It's probably about the fourth attempt to reboot the Doom franchise, and I think it Interactive and Bethesda absolutely nailed it. It's so fast paced and frantic. It's like, it reminds you of playing the old... I'd imagine when you first played the original Doom back in the day on your Windows PC, this is what you'd be imagining.
I do wonder what was going through the minds of id when they created Doom 3, which was obviously a lot slower paced.
Yeah.
And then to go back to sort of like the origins of Doom, because if you think about like classic Doom, it is very much a run and gun type game. Like, it's very much run into a room, destroy the enemies, like literally move around really quickly with your little gun bobbing around like this. Doom 3 took it a lot slower, but you're absolutely right, Richie. With Doom 2016, they really brought it back with Bethesda there.
Well, definitely. They built the mechanics around that quick movement. Like, you get punished if you stop. It is very fast paced, but it was fantastic for it.
So many games. I picked it up in the sale because it was like £4.50 on Stadia. So I was like, I've heard nothing but good things. I'm going to play it at some point. I'll pick it up for less than a £5 and I'll just bank it for whenever I get a window of opportunity. But yeah, I can't wait. We should also probably give a shout off the back of that to the Wolfenstein reboot games as well.
Yeah,
they're really fun. They're really enjoyable. I know you and me, Richie, I think bought them when they were on like a deal not a while back.
It wasn't. What was it? It was
Probably a Black
Wolfenstein.
Friday deal, probably, because I think I got it
It's
for
not
like
New
15 quid.
Colossus. One.
Yeah, New Colossus, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, great games and a great, very frantic energy. Yeah, just like the Borderlands franchise as well. They've kind of seen like another resurgence. Borderlands 2 into Borderlands 3. The prequel, the Handsome Jack collection, kind of bundle everything together, and we had the pre-sequel. So it's kind of been always there, always ticking over in the background. But again, timeless art style, looter shooter games, the kind of the original looter shooter games, right? Before it was even like the thing it is now today. And Gearbox doing some great stuff over there with that.
There's always been looter shooter games, but I think Borderlands was the first first person shooter that I played that ever really had RPG mechanics in it. And then Borderlands 2, I think perfected it. I think Borderlands 2 is probably the epitome of the genre even now, even unless you want to include things like Destiny, which are more MMOs. But in terms of something that is a bit more confined to either single player or co-op, then Borderlands 2 is phenomenal.
Absolutely. And I mean, with Borderlands was the previous gen. Borderlands 2 was that generation. And with the inclusion of like the antagonist of Handsome Jack, it blew Borderlands 2 to such a high level that we saw, the Telltale games. Shout out to those as well, guys. To the Telltale games. Yeah. Tales of the Borderlands was an incredible Telltale game. Again, including Handsome Jack and around that sort of story right there. But no, Borderlands 2 probably my personal choice out of all of the series. It was just so good.
Yes,
and a lot of this amazing stuff is going to transfer over to next gen, which we know we're no doubt going to get a Witcher 4 at some point from CD Projekt Red. You're saying that about Handsome Jack and Tales of the Borderlands. I'd love to know how many traits they're going to take from that and apply to Keanu Reeves' character in Cyberpunk, because it seems like he's going to be just ever present in your world. But there's so much stuff. We may even see a Grand Theft Auto 6 at one point when it transcends across, because we know 5 is going to launch. It will probably come to Stadia at some point, I'd like to think. We know we've got Red Dead, so it's definitely not out of the question. Some massive franchises, obviously all the sports ones, the Call of Duties, they're relentless machines. They're never going to stop. They're never going to rest. We should probably give shouts like Fall Guys. What a time that was. Rocket League. So many titles this generation.
There's too much to talk about, really.
There really is.
Real.
It is. It's a generation of games condensed down to about half an hour or so. But I think the one thing we can all agree, infinite hours of enjoyment and fun as gamers. There's not one thing on that list that I wouldn't put some of my life to and say, great in their own respective rights. Fun to be had. And gaming summarised. And I think the great thing about this little mini series of post shows we've done is we weren't going to pick a definitive winner, because there's just no way. We're three different individuals with similar but also different tastes. And gaming's for everyone. That's the reality. I know we're going to have Game of the Year conversations coming up, and we'll talk about Stadia's Game of the Year and such, and everyone loves the debate, but the reality is games are so varied and so different. There is no way you can really put side by side and compare apples to apples. There's just
not at all.
There's no way, because they all have their own praises, their downfalls, their frustrations, and their happy times all built into it as well.
It's like when you see in forums or on social media and going, "What's the best game to play on this platform?" It's like, well, tell me what sort of games you've enjoyed playing. I might be able to narrow it down, because I just don't think there is ever a best game.
Nope. And it evolves, right?
The best game in the genre,
but it evolves and changes over time. Like you asked me a while ago, what's your favorite game? I might be more inclined to go, it was God of War, but then I really enjoy Ghost of Tsushima. But then as soon as I get a Lord of the Rings or a Star Wars phase, I'm kind of but I'm really Jedi Fallen Order is amazing. But then the Lord of the Rings get, and it's just it ebbs and flows. And I don't think there's ever a time when you can say what is your favorite, because at the end of the day, sometimes just playing Tetris is the best game in the world. Just when you want to chill and just play something super zen. Nice and straightforward. And again, we've not even discussed VR, all the different mobile games. We're not going to talk about them, but there's tons of mobile games that you can have hours and hours of enjoyment, endless hours of fun. Yeah. And I think the summary,
Snake 2.
Snake, man, yeah. And I think Brick Breaker. The summary in general is games of a generation. I think we can all agree that games are cool, games are super cool, and there is fun to be had. But that does bring us to an end of our games of a generation, covering PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch. Obviously, Switch is going to carry on a little bit longer. They're going to carry the torch of last gen until we get a new announcement. But let us know in the comments below, like we said, what your favourite games of a generation are, wrapping up this little mini-series. Do not forget to give us a like and a subscribe to the channel so you are kept in the loop with all future podcasts and post shows as well. And if you do want to support us that little bit more, head on over to patreon.com/Sounds of Stadia, where for as little as $1.79, give or take tax, you can support us that extra little bit further and get this show a whole 5 days earlier than the general public. But thank you very much for tuning in for our generational talk show. My name's been Chris.
I've been Tom.
I've been Richie.
We've been Sounds of Stadia for the post show. Have a great weekend, week, Christmas, whenever you're watching this. Have a great Games of a Generation. Take care. Mess up the exit. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.